My name is Lorraine, and I'm 52 years old. As a widow who spent 8 years building a real estate career from scratch, I thought I knew about trust and betrayal in business. But nothing prepared me for what happened when I placed my complete faith in the one person I loved most. My son Marcus had always been my pride and joy, especially after his father died in that terrible car accident. When the doctors told me I needed emergency heart surgery, Marcus stepped up like the man I'd raised him to be. He promised to take care of everything while I was under the knife. Before I share what happened during those critical hours when I trusted him completely, let me know where you're watching from and please hit that like button. You'll want to stay until the end because the truth about his wife will shock you just as much as it shocked the entire community. 8 years ago, my world collapsed when my husband died in that head-on collision on Interstate 75. Marcus was only 20 at the time, still in college, still believing that parents were invincible. I remember sitting in that hospital waiting room watching my boy try to be strong for me while his whole foundation crumbled. That night, I made a promise to both of us. I would work twice as hard, sacrifice whatever it took to make sure Marcus had every opportunity his father would have wanted for him. I took on 2 jobs immediately. During the day, I worked at Henderson Real Estate, learning the business from the ground up. Evenings and weekends, I cleaned offices downtown. Every dollar went toward Marcus's business degree at State University. I lived on peanut butter sandwiches and instant coffee for months at a time, but seeing Marcus graduate summa cum laude made every sacrifice worth it. After graduation, Marcus landed a position at Sterling Financial Group. Within 3 years, he'd worked his way up to senior analyst. That's where he met Stephanie, this stunning 26-year-old from old money family. She had perfectly straight blonde hair, always wore designer clothes, and had this way of lighting up every room she entered. When Marcus brought her home for the first time, I could see he was completely smitten. They married 2 years ago in this elaborate ceremony that Stephanie's parents paid for. I felt so out of place among all those country club people, but Marcus made sure I felt included. Stephanie seemed sweet enough, though she spent most of her time building her Instagram following. She had nearly 50,000 followers who hung on her every post about luxury lifestyle and fashion tips. Meanwhile, I'd been living modestly in my small 3-bedroom house, the same one where Marcus grew up. Through careful budgeting and some good real estate investments, I'd managed to save $180,000. It wasn't a fortune, but it represented security for my future and something to leave Marcus someday. I kept most of it in a high-yield savings account with about $15,000 in checking for daily expenses. 3 months ago, during a routine checkup, Dr. Morrison found an irregular heartbeat. The follow-up tests revealed a serious blockage in my left anterior descending artery. He called it the widowmaker. Without surgery, I had maybe 6 months to live. The irony wasn't lost on me. After surviving my husband's death and raising Marcus alone, my own heart was about to betray me. When I told Marcus about the diagnosis, I watched the color drain from his face. He immediately took charge, researching the best cardiac surgeons, getting second opinions, making sure I had the finest care available. Stephanie surprised me by being equally supportive. She'd come over with homemade soup, hold my hand during the scary conversations, and even posted about prayers for her mother-in-law on her social media. The week before my surgery, Marcus and Stephanie became my constant companions. They'd arrive every evening after work, bringing groceries and staying for dinner. Marcus would review my medical insurance coverage, making lists of questions for the doctors. Stephanie would tidy up my house and keep the mood light with funny stories from her influencer events. It was during one of these visits that Marcus brought up the practical matters I'd been dreading. We were sitting at my kitchen table going through paperwork when he looked up with serious eyes. "Mom, we need to talk about what happens if something goes wrong during surgery. What if you can't make decisions for yourself? The bills still need to be paid, the mortgage, utilities. Someone has to have access to handle emergencies." I'd been avoiding this conversation, but Marcus was right. I was having major surgery. Complications could leave me unconscious for days or worse. "What are you suggesting?" I asked, though I already knew. "I think you should give me temporary power of attorney, just for financial matters, just while you're recovering. That way, if the hospital needs payment or if any bills come due, I can take care of everything without you worrying about it from your hospital bed." Stephanie nodded supportively from the couch. "It's just practical, Lorraine. Marcus has been handling our finances perfectly. You raised him to be responsible with money." The next morning, we went to First National Bank, where I'd done business for 15 years. Marcus had already contacted them to understand the process. The bank manager, Mrs. Patterson, walked us through the limited power of attorney paperwork. It would give Marcus access to my accounts for essential expenses only. Medical bills, household expenses, anything I would normally pay myself. As I signed the documents, Marcus squeezed my shoulder. "I love you, Mom. I'll take care of everything. You just focus on getting better." His voice carried such conviction, such genuine care. This was my son, the boy I'd raised to be honest and responsible. If I couldn't trust him, who could I trust? That evening, Marcus insisted on staying overnight. He cooked my favorite meal, pot roast with carrots and potatoes, the same recipe his father used to make. We talked late into the night about memories, about his childhood, about how proud his father would have been of the man he'd become. When I finally went to bed, I felt peaceful for the first time since the diagnosis. Surgery was scheduled for 7 in the morning. Marcus drove me to the hospital in his Honda Accord, playing soft jazz to keep us both calm. In the pre-op room, he held my hand while the nurses prepared me for surgery. "When you wake up, I'll be right here," he promised. "Everything's going to be fine." Dr. Morrison had warned me the surgery could take anywhere from 4 to 8 hours depending on what they found once they opened me up. What I didn't expect was waking up nearly 10 hours later in the intensive care unit, feeling like I'd been hit by a freight train. Every breath was agony, and the machines around me beeped constantly. The first face I saw belonged to Nurse Jennifer, a kind woman in her 40s who'd clearly been watching over me. "Welcome back, sweetie," she said softly. Surgery went well, but it was more complicated than expected. Dr. Morrison had to do a triple bypass instead of the single bypass they planned. "Where's Marcus?" I managed to whisper. "Your son stayed here for about 8 hours, honey. He finally went home around 6 to get some rest." The poor boy was exhausted. I felt a mix of gratitude and disappointment. Part of me had hoped to see his face when I woke up, but I understood. He had work responsibilities, and Stephanie probably needed him too. The surgery had taken much longer than anyone expected. The second day brought more of the same. I was moved to a regular room, but the pain medication made everything fuzzy. Marcus called that morning, his voice strained. "Mom, I'm so sorry I can't be there right now. There's this emergency at work, a major client situation I have to handle. I'll be there tonight, I promise." That afternoon, while scrolling through my phone to pass time, I noticed Stephanie's Instagram stories. She'd posted videos from an upscale shopping trip downtown, trying on expensive dresses and showing off a new handbag. The timestamp showed she'd posted them that morning, just hours after Marcus had called about his work emergency. It seemed odd that she'd be shopping while her mother-in-law was recovering from major surgery, but maybe she was dealing with stress differently. The third day, Marcus finally arrived, but something felt off. He seemed jittery, checking his phone constantly, and kept glancing toward the door like he was expecting someone or needed to leave quickly. When I asked about covering the hospital expenses, he waved away my concerns. "Don't worry about money now, Mom. Focus on getting better. I've got everything under control." But when Nurse Jennifer mentioned that the billing department would need to discuss payment arrangements, Marcus's face went pale. He mumbled something about calling them later and quickly changed the subject. I tried to shake off the uneasy feeling. Maybe I was being paranoid because of the medication. Marcus had always been reliable, always followed through on his promises. Still, something in his demeanor reminded me of when he was 12 years old and had broken my favorite lamp, but hadn't told me yet. Later that afternoon, I overheard him taking a hushed phone call in the hallway. Through the partially open door, I caught fragments. "I told you it would take time." "No, she doesn't know yet. By Friday, I promise." When he returned to my room, he claimed it was just work calling about that client emergency. 4 days after surgery, Dr. Morrison cleared me for discharge. I was weak but stable, and the home health nurse would check on me daily. Marcus seemed relieved to finally take me home, but he was still acting strangely distant. During the ride, he kept fidgeting with the radio and avoiding eye contact. "I need to stop by the bank this afternoon," I told him as we pulled into my driveway. "I want to check the account and make sure the hospital bill gets paid promptly." Marcus's knuckles went white on the steering wheel. "Mom, you just got out of the hospital. The bank can wait. Besides, your insurance covered most of it, and I already took care of the copay." Something in his tone made my stomach clench, but I was too exhausted to argue. He helped me into the house and got me settled on the couch with my medications and water. "I need to get back to work," he said, kissing my forehead. "Stephanie will check on you later." After he left, I sat in the quiet house feeling more alone than I had since my husband died. The silence was broken only by the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. Eventually, curiosity got the better of me. I made my way slowly to my home office and opened my laptop. The online banking page loaded with familiar efficiency. I entered my username and password, expecting to see my usual balance with maybe a small dent from medical expenses. Instead, I found myself staring at numbers that made no sense. My savings account, which should have shown $180,000, displayed a balance of $847. My checking account was even worse. It showed negative $2,300 due to overdraft fees. I blinked hard, wondering if the pain medication was affecting my vision. I refreshed the page twice. The numbers didn't change. With shaking hands, I clicked on the transaction history. What I saw made my blood run cold. Over the past 4 days, while I was unconscious and recovering, there had been a flurry of activity. $50,000 had been transferred to something called Golden Opportunities LLC. $85,000 had been withdrawn in cash over 3 consecutive days. Another $45,000 had been transferred to an account labeled S. Marcus, which I realized must be Stephanie's maiden name account. Each transaction was marked as authorized by the power of attorney I had so trustingly signed. Every withdrawal, every transfer was completely legal because I had given Marcus permission to access my accounts. I called the bank immediately, praying there had been some mistake. Mrs. Patterson confirmed what I already knew. All transactions had been properly authorized using the power of attorney. The signature on file matched Marcus's perfectly. Everything was legal and irreversible. When Marcus arrived that evening with takeout dinner, I was waiting at the kitchen table with the laptop open and printouts spread before me. His face went through a series of expressions when he saw the bank statements. First shock, then guilt, then something that looked almost like relief at finally being caught. "Mom, I can explain." "Then explain how my life savings disappeared while I was fighting for my life in surgery." Marcus sat down heavily, his hands shaking. "It wasn't supposed to happen this way. I was trying to help you to help us. Stephanie had this amazing investment opportunity. Her friend Alex, he's this successful entrepreneur, and he needed investors for this incredible new venture. The returns were supposed to be guaranteed 30% in just 6 months." I stared at my son, this man I'd raised, to value honesty above everything else, and felt something break inside my chest that had nothing to do with my recent surgery. "You stole my money based on some investment tip from Stephanie's friend." Marcus's face crumpled. "I didn't steal it, Mom. I invested it. For you, for all of us. The medical bills were going to be enormous, and I thought if I could multiply your savings, you'd never have to worry about money again." "Where is this Golden Opportunities LLC, Marcus? Where can I find Alex and my money?" The silence stretched between us like a chasm. Finally, Marcus whispered, "I don't know. Alex stopped answering his phone 3 days ago. The company website is down. Stephanie says he might have had to leave town suddenly for family reasons." That's when the final piece clicked into place. This wasn't just about a failed investment. This was about a carefully orchestrated plan, and my son had been as much a victim as I was. But unlike me, he had chosen to be complicit. I spent the next morning making phone calls. First to my bank, confirming that the power of attorney was still active and that Marcus could potentially access what little remained. I immediately revoked it. Then I called my homeowner's insurance, discovering that Marcus had somehow managed to take out a home equity loan against my house without my direct knowledge. The power of attorney had made that possible too. By noon, I realized I was facing financial ruin. At 52, with a healing heart and no savings, I was looking at losing my home and my security. But more devastating than the money was the betrayal. My only child, the person I'd sacrificed everything for, had stolen my future while I lay unconscious and vulnerable. That afternoon, I made a decision that would change everything. I called a private investigator named Sarah Chen, who specialized in financial fraud cases. If Marcus and Stephanie thought they could destroy me and walk away, they were about to learn just how wrong they were. "I need to know everything." I told Sarah during our first meeting. About this Alex person, about golden opportunities, about what really happened to my money. And I need to know about my daughter-in-law. Something tells me there's more to this story. Sarah's investigation would take 2 weeks, but what she uncovered would give me the ammunition I needed for the most satisfying revenge of my life. Sarah Chen turned out to be worth every dollar of her $1,500 retainer. Within a week, she'd unraveled the entire scheme with the efficiency of someone who'd seen this type of fraud before. Her report read like a crime novel, except the criminals were living in my son's house. Golden Opportunities, LLC was indeed a shell company, but it hadn't been created by some mysterious Alex character. Marcus had set it up himself using online legal services. The $50,000 had been transferred directly into Marcus's personal checking account, which he'd then used to pay off his credit card debt and buy Stephanie an engagement ring upgrade she'd been demanding. But the real shock came when Sarah showed me the surveillance photos. Stephanie hadn't been shopping alone during those Instagram stories while I was in surgery. She'd been with a man named Alex Rivera, a 32-year-old photographer who specialized in what he called lifestyle branding for social media influencers. The timeline showed they'd been together constantly during the 4 days I was hospitalized. Your daughter-in-law has been having an affair for at least 3 months, Sarah explained, spreading photos across her desk. But here's where it gets interesting. She's been telling Alex that she's separated from your son, that she's getting a divorce, and needs money to start over. She's been using your stolen money to fund hotel rooms, expensive dinners, and a luxury apartment she's been renting as a secret love nest. The photos were damning. Stephanie and Alex entering the Ritz-Carlton downtown. Stephanie wearing a new diamond necklace while having dinner at Le Bernardin. The two of them loading shopping bags into Alex's BMW after what appeared to be a very expensive spree on Fifth Avenue. Does Marcus know about any of this? I asked. Sarah shook her head. Based on our surveillance, your son has no idea about the affair. Stephanie's been very careful to maintain the facade at home while living a completely different life with Alex. She's been telling Alex that the money came from her family trust fund. The final piece of evidence was a recording Sarah had obtained through legal means. Stephanie and Alex discussing their future plans, including how they'd move to California once Stephanie finalized her finances with the family situation. It was clear that Stephanie viewed both Marcus and me as temporary obstacles to her real life. I also traced the $45,000 that went into Stephanie's account, Sarah continued. She withdrew most of it in cash over the past week. Based on our surveillance, she's been giving large amounts to Alex for his so-called business investments. Your money is essentially funding your daughter-in-law's affair. As I sat in Sarah's office looking at the evidence of my family's betrayal, I felt something shift inside me. The grief and shock were transforming into something harder and more focused. These people had stolen my money, my security, and my trust. They'd done it while I was at my most vulnerable, fighting for my life in a hospital bed. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd underestimated a woman who'd already survived losing her husband, raising a child alone, and building a successful career from nothing. I'd been knocked down before, and I'd always found a way to get back up stronger. Sarah, I need you to keep monitoring them. I want to know every move they make, every dollar they spend, every lie they tell, and I need you to help me plan something that will ensure justice is served and the whole community knows exactly who they really are. Sarah smiled the way I imagined a chess master smiled when seeing checkmate several moves ahead. Mrs. Thompson, I think you're going to like what I have in mind. Planning my revenge took careful patience and perfect timing. Sarah's continued surveillance revealed that Stephanie and Alex were growing more careless, believing they'd successfully pulled off their scheme. They'd even started posting photos together on Alex's Instagram, though Stephanie was careful to avoid being tagged in them. 2 weeks after discovering the truth, I made a call that surprised everyone. I telephoned Marcus and told him I wanted to reconcile. Honey, I've had time to think about everything. You made a mistake, but you're still my son. I don't want this to destroy our family. Marcus was so relieved he nearly cried over the phone. Mom, I've been feeling so guilty. I never meant for things to go this far. Stephanie and I want to make this right. I know you do, sweetheart. That's why I want to do something special. Your birthday is next month, and I want to throw you a proper celebration, a big party with all our friends and your colleagues. It's time to show everyone that our family is stronger than ever. I could hear Stephanie in the background getting excited about a party. This was exactly what I'd hoped for. Nothing appealed to her more than a social media-worthy event where she could play the role of beloved daughter-in-law. Over the next 3 weeks, I threw myself into party planning with an enthusiasm that fooled everyone, including myself sometimes. I rented the elegant private dining room at Riverside Country Club. I invited 60 people, Marcus's colleagues from Sterling Financial, our neighbors, my real estate clients, Stephanie's Instagram friends, and several members of the local media who I'd gotten to know through my business networking. Stephanie was in heaven, posting daily updates about the amazing celebration my incredible mother-in-law was planning. She even posted a heartfelt tribute about how family means everything and how grateful she was to have me in her life. The comments from her followers were full of heart emojis and praise for our beautiful relationship. Meanwhile, Sarah was capturing every moment of Stephanie's continued affair with Alex. We now had documentation of them together at 3 different hotels, evidence of cash payments to Alex totaling $38,000, and recordings of them planning their future together once Stephanie handled the old lady situation. The day of the party, I arrived early to oversee the setup. I'd hired a professional AV company to install projection screens and sound equipment, telling everyone it was for a special slideshow celebrating Marcus's life and achievements. The technicians thought it was sweet that a mother would go to such elaborate lengths for her son's birthday. Marcus and Stephanie arrived looking stunning. Marcus wore his best suit, and Stephanie had clearly spent hours perfecting her makeup and styling her hair. She'd chosen a designer dress that I later learned cost $2,000 paid for, with money that used to be in my savings account. As guests arrived, Stephanie worked the room like the social media influencer. She was taking selfies with everyone and making sure every angle was perfectly documented. Several people commented to me about what a wonderful daughter-in-law I had, how lucky I was to have such a close-knit family. After dinner, I stood up to give what everyone expected would be an emotional toast to my son. Thank you all for coming to celebrate Marcus's 29th birthday. As a mother, there's nothing more important to me than family trust and loyalty. The room fell quiet as I clicked the remote for the first slide. A beautiful photo of Marcus as a baby appeared on the screen behind me. I raised my son to value honesty above everything else. His father would have been so proud of the man he's become. The slideshow continued with photos of Marcus growing up, graduating college, starting his career. Stephanie beamed beside him, occasionally wiping away a tear for the cameras. Several guests recorded the presentation on their phones. Family means making sacrifices for each other, I continued as photos of Marcus's wedding day filled the screen. It means being there during the most difficult times, supporting each other through challenges. Then the slideshow changed. The next image was a screenshot of my bank account from the morning of my surgery, showing $180,000 in savings. A collective gasp went up from the audience. This was my account balance the day I went into surgery, trusting my son to handle any emergencies. The next slide showed my account 4 days later, $847. Marcus went white as a sheet. Stephanie started to stand up, but I wasn't finished. But the real betrayal wasn't just about money. The screen now displayed photos of Stephanie and Alex at the Ritz-Carlton, time-stamped during the days I was in the hospital. While I was fighting for my life and my son was grieving what he thought was a failed investment, my daughter-in-law was using my life savings to fund her affair. The room erupted in shocked murmurs. Stephanie tried to run toward the exit, but several guests blocked her path, their phones recording everything. Marcus sat frozen, staring at photos of his wife with another man. The final slide was audio footage. Stephanie's voice filled the room. "Once I get the rest of the money from the old lady's accounts, we can be together permanently. Marcus is so gullible he believes everything I tell him." That's when the doors opened and Detective Rodriguez from the Financial Crimes Unit walked in with 2 officers. "Mrs. Stephanie Marcus and Mr. Marcus Thompson, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit financial fraud and abuse of power of attorney." As they led Marcus and Stephanie away in handcuffs, the local news reporter I'd invited was capturing every moment. By morning, the story would be front page news, local influencer arrested in elaborate fraud scheme against mother-in-law. The legal proceedings took 6 months to resolve, but the evidence Sarah and I had gathered made the case straightforward. Marcus pled guilty to financial fraud and abuse of power of attorney, receiving 2 years probation and an order to make full restitution. Stephanie faced additional charges for the affair-related financial deception and received 1 year in county jail. Alex Rivera, it turned out, had been running similar schemes with 3 other women. Stephanie's case helped prosecutors build a larger case against him for organized fraud. He was sentenced to 5 years in federal prison. The restitution process was slower, but I eventually recovered $130,000 of my stolen money. The remaining $50,000 was gone forever, spent on luxuries and Alex's business ventures. But I'd learned to live with that loss. The hardest part wasn't the money, though. It was watching my son's life fall apart and knowing that I'd played a role in his downfall. Yes, he'd betrayed me in the worst possible way, but he'd also been manipulated by a woman who'd never loved him at all. Marcus lost his job at Sterling Financial when the scandal became public. Stephanie divorced him immediately after her arrest, claiming she'd been coerced into the scheme. She moved back to her parents' estate in Connecticut, where her family's money helped rebuild her reputation enough for her to restart her influencer career under a different name. For the first few months after everything was resolved, I felt empty and exhausted. My physical recovery from surgery was complete, but the emotional healing would take much longer. I'd won my battle for justice, but I'd lost my son in the process. He'd written me several letters from jail, apologizing and begging for forgiveness, but I wasn't ready to respond. It was during this difficult period that I discovered something unexpected. The story of my public revenge had resonated with hundreds of other people who'd experienced similar betrayals. I started receiving emails and letters from all over the country. Women who'd been financially abused by family members, parents whose children had stolen their savings, elderly people who'd been manipulated by trusted caregivers. A support group for financial fraud victims invited me to speak at their monthly meeting. Then, another group asked me to share my story. Before long, I was traveling to different cities, talking to audiences about the importance of protecting yourself, even from people you love and trust. Through this work, I met incredible people who'd survived betrayals far worse than mine and had found ways to rebuild their lives with wisdom and grace. I learned that strength doesn't come from never being hurt, but from choosing how to respond when hurt comes. A year after the arrests, Marcus was released from his probation early for good behavior and full restitution payments. He'd found work at a smaller financial firm and had been attending therapy to understand how he'd allowed himself to become complicit in Stephanie's scheme. He called me on a Tuesday evening, his voice shaky with nerves. "Mom, I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I know I destroyed everything between us. But I need you to know that not a day goes by that I don't regret every choice I made. I was weak and foolish, and I let someone I barely knew convince me to betray the person who'd given me everything." We talked for 2 hours that night. I told him about my speaking engagements, about the people I'd met who'd survived similar betrayals, about the strange sense of purpose I'd found in helping others navigate the aftermath of broken trust. He told me about his therapy, about the hard work of understanding how he'd become someone he didn't recognize, about his determination to earn back some measure of my respect. We didn't reconcile that night or even that year. Trust, once shattered completely, takes time to rebuild, even partially. But we started somewhere new with both of us older and sadder and hopefully wiser than we'd been before. 2 years later, I still speak regularly to groups about financial fraud and family betrayal. I've helped dozens of people navigate the legal system, connected them with resources, and most importantly, reminded them that surviving betrayal doesn't make you weak or foolish. It makes you human. Marcus and I have lunch once a month now. Our relationship will never be what it was before, but it's become something different. Something built on acknowledgement of past pain rather than the naive trust I'd once thought was love. He's remarried now to a woman named Diana who works as a nurse and has never owned a designer handbag in her life. She knows our whole story, and she's insisted on signing a prenup that protects any inheritance I might someday choose to leave. The money I recovered is invested more carefully now, and I've updated all my legal documents to include additional safeguards. I've also started a small foundation that provides legal assistance to elderly people who've been financially abused by family members. People often ask if I regret exposing Marcus and Stephanie so publicly, if I wish I'd handled it privately within the family. My answer is always the same. Betrayal thrives in silence and shame. When we drag these crimes into the light, we protect not just ourselves, but the next potential victims. Trust is like a bank account. It takes years to build up, but can be emptied in a single transaction. The question isn't whether we should trust again, but whether we're wise enough to verify while we trust. Love doesn't require blind faith, and protecting yourself doesn't mean you've stopped believing in good people. It means you've learned that even good people can make terrible choices when they're desperate or manipulated or simply weak. Some days I still feel sad about what I lost that trust, that naive belief that family means safety. But most days I feel grateful for what I gained, the knowledge that I'm stronger than I knew, the purpose I've found in helping others, and the wisdom to know that surviving betrayal isn't the end of love. It's just the beginning of a different, more honest way of living. Have you or someone you know ever experienced financial betrayal by a trusted family member? How do you think you would have handled discovering such deception? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories of surviving family betrayal. Don't forget to share this with anyone who might need to hear that they can rebuild their life after trust is broken. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that your strength is often discovered not in avoiding hardship, but in how you choose to rise after you've been knocked down. Until next time, protect your heart, but don't close it completely.